Hello, and welcome to this very special webinar on the future of St. Jude-on-the-Hill. I'm Revd Prater, the Executive Director of the Lutyens Trust America. Our webinar series, along with our architectural tours, are part of our efforts to protect and promote the spirit and substance of the work of Sir Edwin Lutyens. On our LTL tour last June, we were given a wonderful tour by David Davidson of the Hampstead Gardens Suburb, where the central square showcases a unique ensemble of Lutyens' work as architect and as a planner, with 2 churches, plus a vicarage and manse, the Institute, which is now a school, and a number of residences. One of the highlights of our visit was St. Jude-on-the-Hill. Church is an architectural marvel, but it's currently experiencing some major hurdles to its continued existence. This was Lutyens' first major church, and since Liverpool Cathedral was not built completely to his plans, it's also his largest church. Getting to design a church was important to Lutyens. Only a year before he was approached for this commission, he was writing from Lindisfarne. I cannot, at least have not, arrived at a church, which is depressing. As you'll see, the church that Lutyens produced is unique. During our visit, we're fortunate to meet St. Jude's equally unique and amazing priest in charge, Reverend Emily Koltveit. Reverend Emily invited our group to tour the vicarage, another Lutyens building. And while we were there, we noticed a framed poster of the 90s classical supergroup, the Medieval Babes. Turns out Reverend Emily had a very successful singing career on an international level before she became a vicar, singing not only with the Medieval Babes, but also Celtic Legend and her own heavy metal band, Pythia. Em began to explore her calling in the church in Hackney as an events manager of St. John's, helping to bring bands such as Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, and Elbow to perform at that church. She then turned around a failing pub in Colindale, winning Community Pub of the Year twice in the Great British Pub Awards, while serving as church warden in her local parish. Em then responded to the call to ordain ministry and studied at Ripon College, Cuddleston, Oxford. Reverend Emily is dedicated to nurturing the vocation of others and encouraging spiritual exploration that faces toward the welcome and peace of Jesus Christ. Now that you've met Reverend Emily, let me introduce the rest of our distinguished panel. Claire Williams lives and works in Hampstead Garden Suburb and is a member of St. Jude-on-the-Hill congregation. She retired home to England in 2024 after 20 years of living in Boston, Massachusetts, where she founded and ran her medical device development company. On her return home, she quickly settled into volunteer work, focusing on archival activities both for the Hampstead Garden Suburb Trust Archive and working with a like-minded colleague, establishing a new, rich archive at St. Jude. She is a passionate gardener and has created a new garden at her home based on Gertrude Jekyll's garden plans. This garden will have its first open days in the summer of 2025. Ankie Barnes is a native of Johannesburg, South Africa. Ankie is educated at the University of Witwatersrand and Yale University. He traveled extensively and gained professional experience working in London, Cape Town, and Guatemala before moving to the United States in 1981. Ankie gained a valuable experience working on a wide range of projects with Hartman Cox Architects before forming his own firm, BVA, with co-founder Steve Vance. The firm is well known for its residential work, with a particular emphasis in the classical and traditional realm. Ankie's design agility and passion for merging traditional design with advanced technologies are widely recognized. In 2014, he was named a member of the AIA College of Fellows for his distinctive contributions to the profession and society. He serves on several boards of organizations, most importantly to us, the Lutyens Trust America. Tom Kligerman was raised in Connecticut and New Mexico and spent years in France and England as a student. These experiences sparked his interest in the rich history of domestic architecture, gardens, and landscapes. Before founding Kligerman Architecture and Design, Tom co-founded Ike Kligerman Barclay with John Ike and Joel Barclay. He began his architectural career at Robert A.M. Stern Architects and received his Bachelor of Arts from Columbia University and is Master of Architecture from Yale. Tom is passionate about the design process and loves studying and creating architectural models. He serves on the boards of several charitable and educational institutions, including, again, most importantly to us, the Lutyens Trust America. Thank you all for coming today. Please hold your questions. You can put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. And I now turn over to our distinguished panel.
Thanks, Robin. I think I'm the first one to speak, and if we go to the first image, this is a painting by John Constable of Salisbury Cathedral. It was painted in 1823. Lutyens did not design this building, but we thought it'd be an important place to start just because it shows this idea of this beautiful spired cathedral in an English landscape, the trees and the green around it. And the next picture shows St. Jude-on-the-Hill from Hampstead Heath, actually from Hampstead Heath, I think it's called the extension, where you see the same idea of this incredible spire rising out of a leafy garden suburb, the Hampstead garden suburb. This is on the north side of London. Next. Here is a drawing from Lutyens' office, which is interesting because it shows in the distance a shadow of that spire. There are actually two churches, as Ankie Barnes will explain when we look at the plans. There's the high spire in the background and a lower church in the foreground. And you see around it that it's part of a composition and part of the garden suburb. So the churches were conceived as part of a greater whole. It wasn't just two churches on the hill. Here's an early photograph with the suburb built out. You can see the two churches in the distance and the roads with the little trees. And I think our next slide shows that it really has greened in. This is actually a photograph taken from right in front of one of the churches, looking at Lutyens designed houses forming a square around the churches, particularly St. Jude, that we're going to be discussing today. But you can see it actually is a green garden suburb. Ankie and I took these photographs, a lot of photographs of the suburb on a recent trip. And you can see on the left, one of the gatehouses that is down at the bottom of the suburb along Hampstead Heath when it was first built. And on the right there, you can see what it looks like today with the wonderful brickwork, tile, and the wood and everything. But again, set into this leafy greenery. And as Robin mentioned, at the top, there was the manse, which is now, I think it's called the Institute. They may have a more formal name, but it's a girls' school, which is, I think, free once you get in.
It is separate from the manse. The manse was part of the Free Church.
Thank you. We are all learning on this webinar.
Sorry.
But this is opposite the churches and is an amazing composition by Edwin Lutyens at the top of the hill facing the two churches. Ankie, do you want to talk about the plan?
Thank you. Yes, this image is from the town plan, pretty much as it was built and conceived in a combination of the work of very well-known landscape architect Raymond Unwin and his partner Barry Parker. And they were working on the Hampton Garden Suburb. And although this is about St. Jude's, the Garden Suburb was an ideal project that was possible because the tube was being extended out of London from Charing Cross, and also being able to reach this piece of land and actually be able to work in the city seemed possible. And Henrietta Barnett was a main benefactor. Her husband was a vicar in St. Jude's Church in London, working with sort of unfortunate people in very tight and poor conditions in the East End of London, and thought that if people could live in more beautiful surroundings, they would indeed benefit from it. So the square at the middle with the two rectangles, Robin, maybe you can just highlight them. That is really what Lutyens was called in to do. He sort of crashed the party. The chair of the board of the Hampton Garden Suburb was a client of Lutyens. It was Sir Arvid Littleton. He was a lawyer, a sportsman, and a Liberal member of Parliament. And Lutyens had designed a house for him in Scotland that many people know called Grey Walls in 1901. And in fact, just about the same time as this work was being done, he was working on designs for his later house called Wittersham. And so he was asked to join the team just to work on the square and the two church buildings. The other architects apparently weren't that offended, I'm pleased to say, and they all ended up getting on very well. They were asked or required by the board to sign each other's drawings when the design was done, which is a rare, a wonderful piece of cooperation. Let's go to the next slide if we can, Robin. These are 4 different studies that show the development of ideas for the central square. And you can see the top left was sort of earlier. The houses seem to be closer and ringing and almost touching the corners of the church. And then in you can see the A, B, C, D. You can see the development. I think if you look at the last one, D, it's really most interesting because it was built almost exactly like this. You can see the 2 churches in the square. The longer church on the right, that footprint is St. Jude's. So you can see it is actually bigger than the Free Church, which is on the left. The little building to the top right of the Free Church is the Lutyens designed rectory where Reverend Emily lives right now. I do think it's interesting that just to the lower right corner of St. Jude's, Robin, there's a house that looks like it's turning the corner that would have closed a smaller square to the right of that church. And in the same way, there would have been a smaller square to the left of the Free Church. But in fact, when they were built, I'm pleased to say that didn't happen, and they already sit in a bigger square. Perhaps the next slide, Robin. Right, so this is the scheme is built, and you can see that the churches and rectory and the manse basically sit out in the screen with a little more space around it. And I think it's very successful in person when you get there. The school complex is at the top of the slide, and you can see some radial streets, well, axial streets moving left and right. Also point out the very simple landscape scheme, which is no longer what's there now. And also, Robin, you could just highlight the little monument to Henrietta Barnett, which is still to be seen. It's a very small Lutyens construction there with a little square and circle just above the cursor. Let's go to the next slide. Tom.
So, you know, as Robin said, he wanted to design churches. He did a number that we only talk, not that many actually. We want to talk about 3 and just compare them so you can get a sense of the size and scale of St. Jude's. So on the left, at Castle Drogo, he did a chapel, as you can see the outside of there in the lower left-hand part of the photograph. In the middle is St. Jude's, and you can see the Free Church to its left and some of the other buildings around it. And on the right is his Catholic Liverpool Cathedral, a rendering. The chapel on the left was built, obviously St. Jude's was. Only the crypt of the Liverpool Cathedral was built, and it is a giant space. We look at the next slide, you can begin to see the comparison in sizes. So these are all drawn to scale, all the same size. That's the Castle Drogo Chapel in plan. And the next slide, that's the cathedral. Only the basement of the lower part of that building was built, and I recently visited, and that alone is vast. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see a plan of St. Jude's in scale. So you can see, although it's a very big church, it's really a cathedral-sized church. In fact, I think Reverend Emily told us in some ways it's classified as a cathedral, although it doesn't have a bishop. It's a big church. If we go to the next slide, there's a section through the Liverpool Cathedral. That very bottom lower left, those rooms down the bottom are all that was built. But if you go to the next slide, you can see that if you were to build St. Jude's in there, it would fit within the Liverpool Cathedral. The scale of that building was gigantic. Again, you can see the scale of the people in that little drawing that Ankie did of the section through St. Jude's. Next. This is the facade of St. Jude's with that wonderful thing you'll see in the photographs, the roof coming down low, giving it this very kind of low residential scale, the big window in the middle. Brickwork next. And the plan in a little more detail where you can see that it is a cathedral plan, a long axial plan. There's a tower essentially at the crossing. It's at the middle of the church. In the upper left is a little chapel, but what's really interesting, you'll see a photograph in a minute, is the Lady Chapel below, which is quite a beautiful intimate space within this larger church. And there you see a close-up across the asphalt of the spire of St. Jude's.
This is a comparison of the two churches together, pretty much in scale. And what is interesting, it shows best in the slide on the left, you can see all the way through the clear glass divided windows below the dome of the Free Church to the sky on the other side. You can see the same idea is certainly possible in St. Jude's on the right. And this is something that we think he probably took from one of his great heroes, Sir Christopher Wren. A number of Wren's churches, this is possible. The windows are very similar to those in St. Paul's Cathedral and in the Chelsea Pensioners, the chapel and the dining hall. Next one.
And those two sets of windows line up with each other when you're on the simple across the square.
Yep.
Important. Looking one way, looking the other. This slide is interesting. As Tom mentioned earlier, you can see the clay tiles tumbling down on the left to, as Tom said, a very residential scale at the corner. So the church is very welcoming of people that are walking around the suburb. And you can see with the sort of telephoto nature of it, that the roofs of the houses in the background that were designed clearly are speaking to the roofs of the church. So this is really the first time that we see Lutyens working both as an architect and also as an urban planner. And compared to that earlier sketch from Lutyens' office that you saw, that Tom put up earlier, where there were just large gables, this idea of wrapping the roofs around and bringing the scale down was clearly something that he began to focus on. I think as he was developing the designs for the houses, as well as for these buildings. The right-hand building is the front of, in this slide, is the front of the Free Church. Next, please. Tom, do you want to talk about these dormers?
Yeah, these are dormers on the side of St. Jude's, which are, you know, wonderful for a lot of reasons. One of the things I like about them is this mix of bricks or arts and crafts vibe with the tile roof, but capped by a very classical entablature and cornice. And if you look at the way that brick is located there, it's almost like a flat triumphal arch thing element connected back to the roof with a sort of a gap of clay tile. Notice the brick colors of the brick too while we're here, the red and the gray.
Also, I'll just say at a smaller scale, most of the houses have, for their second stories, they have an engaged rounded top dormer, which is a sort of mini-me version of this. So the language of these engaged dormers that are in the plane of the exterior wall are larger, more monumental scale here and smaller on the houses. Go ahead, Tom.
Side door in. This is on axis with the steeple. Maybe we should move to the next one. And inside, Ankie, you want to talk about these murals and the interiors?
Sure. So this is the Lutyens designed geometric and beautiful altar, which is in the smaller chapel, which was at the top of the slide earlier on, and you can see the walls are beautifully frescoed. Lutyens' love of geometry is reflected in the details of the chapel, and you'll hear more about that and the altar dressings later. You can also see the geometry used in the stone down below. But it's interesting that Lutyens' plan for both these churches was just to have them simple in white plaster. But in fact, they were being built through the period of the First World War, and it really led to the interior fresco project being started in the Lady Chapel as a kind of war memorial. Let's go on to the next slide. Here are some of the frescoes that you see in the Lady Chapel. And the Lady Chapel was commissioned, or the painter who painted the Lady Chapel and then later the rest of the church was a well-known painter, very successful, called Walter P. Starmer, who had quite a career before the First World War. As soon as the war started, he volunteered to serve on the front, working for the Red Cross and the YMCA, and he was there really until the end of the war, and then he came back and almost immediately was given this commission as a sort of a war memorial. And I think, as we discussed earlier, Claire was saying it was probably a healing process for him, but you can see the beauty of these, and luckily these are unpainted. Yes, here are some windows. Tom, do you want to talk about these?
Well, I think we can just talk briefly about them. On the right is that big window that you could see through from both churches, and it's just striking because it is so similar to Wren's windows in his churches, and also at I think at Chelsea Hospital. It's taken right out of Wren. It's maybe the beginning of Lutyens' interest in his Renaissance. And on the left is that incredible thermal window. And we put it here just because of the sort of sculptural mass of that wall, where those windows are cut back and the surfaces are actually splayed. That's not just perspective, it's sort of a forced perspective where the bricks splays out. It's quite beautiful. What's the next slide? Here's the Free Church, which does not have a high spire, and we put it here just as a reference. The St. Jude's is off to the left of this, and then the next picture is, oops, the interior of the Free Church. And we put it in because, again, Lutyens design, you can see how the white tracery of the columns and the arch going overhead, and the clean, the clean surfaces of the dome and vaults and everything really lets the architecture read very strongly. And if you go to the next slide, here is the interior of St. Jude's before the murals. This was, we think, Lutyens' intention to have a very clear architectonic explanation of the structure and organization of the building. Next. But this is what it looks like today with the addition of these murals. You want to talk a little bit about them, Ankie?
Yeah, sure. This is the Lady Chapel. Great slide. This shows the Lady Chapel, this sort of diminutive, I think it's 2 circles in plan, beautiful small side chapel, and it was the first commission that I mentioned earlier. And the subject was to be Christian women through history, and actually ended up with some famous suffragettes who lived in the neighborhood. It was so successful and so admired that, in fact, he was commissioned a second time in 1923 to actually paint the rest of the church interiors other than the white pilasters, all the plaster surfaces. And that is depicting the life and the teachings of Christ. So that is the subject matter you see in the rest. But the interplay between the remaining architecture, mostly in brick, a little bit in plaster, and the limestone, and the paintings, I think particularly in this chapel, are very successful. Next slide. Tommy, you want to talk about these?
Well, I think this is everything we've said before. You can see the structure of those dormers from the inside. And what's next, Robin? And the floors, just, the master geometry you can see here in 2 areas of the church. Oh, finally, and we have to move along. On the left, that little horse was designed by Lutyens' father, who was a painter of horses. But he did this horse as a memorial to the war horses of World War I, I think millions of which were killed. On the right is the little, we think, Lutyens designed wooden pedestal. And then the next slide, quickly, this is something
I'll just say that horse was not actually, that's a replacement for the one that Lutyens' father did. But that is his pedestal.
They were both stolen, yeah.
Oh, wow. This is in a church in Mells, which is in west of London, a memorial to a fallen soldier. And we put it in just because of the connection to the horse and the base. But what's interesting here is seeing this done just a few years after that base, in particular, after the next slide shows his cenotaph in Whitehall. And you can see the connection. These are all things he moves into a more classical vein from the arts and crafts. Next. And that's Ankie and I are going to turn it over to the rest of the presentation.
Robin, do you just want to point out in this painting that depicts really all of Lutyens' built work where St. Jude's is and where the cenotaph
circle is the cenotaph, and this is St. Jude's on the right.
And the towering building in the middle is, of course, the unbuilt cathedral in Liverpool.
By the way, these paintings are all done at the scale that these buildings are all at the same scale. So you see the sense of that cathedral.
And this is by Carl Loben, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire and Emily, please go.
Thank you. And thanks so much to everyone at the Lutyens Trust America for making this happen and for inviting me to come and speak on this webinar. My name is the Revd Emily Koltveit, and I've been the priest in charge at St. Jude-on-the-Hill for the last 18 months. It's quite an interesting story about how I found myself here in this parish. I've always worked in sort of areas of great sort of social justice need, Hackney and Camden and places like that in London. So to find myself in what is a fairly affluent borough and parish is quite new for me. But really what happened is that the bishop asked me if I would come and have a look at the parish, because it had found itself at a point of crisis and the diocese were not sure whether St. Jude's had a future or not. and the bishop asked if I would come up here and have a look at it and see if I might be able to help. So let's have a look at the next slide. And this is just a little short video clip that we had made a little bit before I got here, but I think it really shows what an extraordinarily beautiful place it is to live and what a magnificent building St. Jude's is. The eagle-eyed of you might notice that there's something missing, which I'll come to a little bit later on, but you can get a sense that how this really is a village parish on the outskirts of Golders Green, which is a very built up area. So we live in this wonderful paradise, but we can kind of get into the centre of London and be in the city in a very short period of time. And that's kind of what makes it such a unique place to be. First time I walked into the parish church, my heart just soared out of my chest because it is the most extraordinary building. I don't think I'd ever seen anything like it before, and I felt an instant connection and a calling to come and serve this parish and see if I might be able to sort out some of the problems. I arrived here and there was no church wardens, no treasurer, a small group of very dedicated people who were becoming quite tired, and a very unsure future for this parish, whether it would be able to remain open and whether the community were deemed fit to be able to care for the building, which has significant problems. Thank you, Robin. So this is the moment that I was licensed to become the priest in charge. I was licensed to be here just for 3 years to see whether we might be able to make a change. And I've been here for 18 months now, and that's Bishop Revd, then the Bishop of Edmonton, licensing me and giving me my orders to go forward. Thank you, Robin. And this is me celebrating at Holy Communion. I think it's really important that when a parish needs to make significant changes in order to survive, we don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. We are a high church, and that's how we worship. It's all bells and smells, as they say in the Church of England. So we're quite Catholic facing in the way that we worship. And that's very important to us. We also have a wonderful choir, which we are so lucky to have, which is led by Director of Music, Nicholas Chalmers, who's also Associate Conductor of the Royal Opera House, Principal Conductor of the National Youth Choir, and involved in many, many brilliant projects, and he's fantastic. So our worship life here is really wonderful, and I think really helps people to have a meeting with God when they are with us. Next slide, please. I think it's important to show this because St. Jude's isn't just a spectacular building, it is a body of people. And here's a shot of some of our congregation who come here every Sunday and throughout the week and make a home in this extraordinary place for all sorts of reasons. We have quite a diverse congregation, and this is the new Bishop of Edmonton, Anderson, when he came to visit us recently in the centre of the picture, and we're really delighted that he's here with us in this part of London. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Claire now, who's going to show you some of our treasures.
Thanks, Em. So much has been written about Lutyens and the architecture of St. Jude, and certainly about the interior of it, particularly the Starmer extensive wall painting scheme, which I heard yesterday is actually 1,103 square meters of wall painting. So I think it sort of talks a little more just to how very, very big St. Jude really is. It's 200 feet long if you look at it measure from the exterior, and the spire caps out at around about 186 feet. So we really are a very, very big church in physical terms, and Em's going to be coming back to that a little later on. But what I thought I would do today is talk about a smaller area of the church, which has been blessed with some really beautiful things in it. And it's very rich in the things that were commissioned to be created by Edwin Lutyens. And in the next slide, what you will see is the St. John Chapel. And the St. John Chapel was the gift. I'll just point out where it is. Yeah, it's right there. So it's just in front of the vestry on the southeast corner of the church. And as you look down towards the sanctuary, it's to the right-hand side of the sanctuary. And it's known as the St. John Chapel, but in fact, it was the gift of Sir Robert Leicester Harmsworth and Lady Harmsworth in memory of their son, Robert Lovell St. John Harmsworth. And he died in 1920, aged only 22 years old. Sir Robert and Lady Harmsworth gave the gift of the chapel in 1923, and it was consecrated in the October of that same year. If you go on to the next slide, Robin. And this is a picture you saw just recently, but the altar here is thought to be the only altar that was commissioned and designed by Lutyens himself. And what he also did to go in this chapel that was also commissioned at the same time was this stunning collection of crystal, rock crystal, and gold metal candlesticks, vases, and a crucifix, which you can see here. Ankie and Tom were alluding already to some of the design features of Lutyens' work. And you see against this green and white background, the circles which Lutyens picks up all the way through the church. We see it on the floors and in other parts of the church all the way through. At the bottom here, the painting in it is actually by Maurice Griefenhagen, who met the stained glass artist who did the windows in the Harmsworth Chapel. And it actually depicts St. John holding a chalice. And I don't think you can quite see it, but there is a serpent in there somewhere. The crystal set you can see, or if you could go back one slide, Robin, for a second. Thanks. The crystal set you can see here is really quite beautiful. It's hard to gauge the scale of this. It's actually really very big. And you could be excused for thinking that when we got it initially back at the end of 1927, that it's sort of calm, quite majestic presence would mirror all its years that it sort of had amongst us. But in fact, it was anything but. The pieces you see here today seem to have had sort of quite a wayward life in their midst. First of all, they went away for a while for safekeeping during the Second World War. We don't know where. When they were due to come back, it was announced in our parish papers, our parish magazine, in July 1945. They'd been away somewhere in England, and that's all we've ever really known about exactly where they went. But they went with it, with the stained glass window as well from the chapel, until their safe return. But that actually wasn't the end of their travels, because a couple of years later, there were two robberies that occurred, divided by about 5 years. First of all, 2 candlesticks of this set were stolen in 1958. And apparently the culprit was very, very well known to the Golders Green police. They picked him up pretty shortly afterwards, and he was obviously struck by some kind of fit of conscience, because he immediately confessed that he'd stolen them. And the Golders Green police got all the medals and praise for having returned them to the church very, very rapidly in a short space of time. But however, a robbery again took place in 1963. And the second time around, we just weren't quite so lucky. These were not ever recovered. And we were able, through an insurance claim, to have 2 copies made, 2 replicas made from the 2 copies, the 2 originals that we had left. So we've gone back to being a set of 4 candlesticks with the 2 vases and the crucifix. And the only other time we've let them out of our sight after all of this was in 1972. They just briefly went off to St. Paul's Cathedral. But I'm happy to say that we've now got them back. They live amongst us, so they're safely and secured away. And we've had them around for the rest of the time. On the next slide, what you will see is just the fragility of some of this. These 2 vases have got some damage that's occurred over the years. We don't know when the damage has happened, but what you can see here, particularly look towards the bottom, are the inclusions in the crystal. Lutyens was very specific in his instructions to the manufacturers that he didn't want pure crystal. He preferred the more interesting rock crystal with its inclusions. He calls them striations in his instructions to the manufacturers. And on the next slide, you can see a close-up of one of the candlesticks, again with the striations, with the inclusions clearly visible in there, and more of the sort of triangular facets that they have. In the next slide, this is actually, I think this is the glory of this altar set, and this is known as the Harmsworth crucifix. Lutyens based the design for this on the Velázquez 1632 painting of Christ on the cross. And as we can see in the next slide, Lutyens was really heavily influenced by the painting, and particularly its anatomical features and proportions. Things I think that make it so really human for us are the sort of the curve of the arms, the drop and the angle of the head. But more interestingly, if you just go back a second to you can see that Christ's feet are not crossed here. They're actually parallel feet. And this sort of gives a sense of almost calm repose to it that the altar set has as well. And on the next slide after this one, we've got, this is Lutyens' drawing that currently resides over at the Royal Institute of British Architects. And you can see again the very accurate and true depiction that came through with it. Now, if you look on the next slide, it's got the reverse of this drawing itself. And this is our one and only clue that we've got as to where these were even made. You'll see that it says it's dated for December the 30th of 1927. It was for the parish works. And Lutyens says, NB, rock crystal for all this, including the Christ in high quality, but not absolutely pure. There must be some striations. And he also submitted a picture of the Velázquez Christ en Choix. So this has given us our first ever clue that we've got to where the rock crystal set was made. We know now that it was made in Paris. I've started researching some crystal manufacturers for 1927 in Paris to see if we can get some more information about the work that was actually done. So more on that another time. The other place this crucifix is reflected is actually in the Calvary Garden. A lot of people think this is a war memorial, but actually it isn't. It was intended to be there on the east wall of the church in what is known now as the Calvary Garden. But you can see again that the faithfulness to the Velázquez is still very much there, with the parallel feet and the drop of the head. This is a wonderful shot, I think, that shows the crucifix standing on the high altar, looking down the nave towards the west door of the church. So what you see here is actually as you walk up the road towards the church with the terrain around us, the crucifix on the east wall suddenly it suddenly becomes clear to you as you get nearer and nearer to the church. It's uncovered and remains in the Calvary Garden, which was completely restored and replanted as part of our centenary celebrations in 2011. And so what you will see on the next slide is part of the battle. We've talked a lot about the beauty of the things in the church, but what you'll also see here is that St. Jude is this vast home. I mean, firstly to our community and to the many and historic treasures that we've got, but with a church such as ours of such cathedral-sized proportions, it comes with challenges and responsibilities that Revd has now taken on and going to lead us into a new era of putting it all as much as we can to rights.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I mean, our problem as a church is not really our attendance, our congregation. We are one of the major churches in the country, which fits in the same category as cathedrals and minsters at the moment in the Church of England. Our problem is that we have a very, very vulnerable building, and congregations, what most people don't understand is that Anglican churches are totally self-funding. And in fact, we actually have an obligation to give quite a large proportion of our income back to the common fund, to the central pot of the Church of England. And this is where our vulnerability as a church lies, is that we have a building that needs really significant care. And so here you can see some of the cracking that we've got, which is kind of all over the building in various places. Here you will see some of the damage to the wall paintings. This is not by any means the most damaged wall painting, but it just sort of really shows how much these things need restoration work in order to preserve them for future generations. If we move forwards, here again in the Lady Chapel, where we have some of the finest wall paintings, we've got some significant cracking again there. And if we move forwards, again, this is the wall painting that's right in your eye line as you are looking up to the high altar during Sunday worship, and this is also significantly damaged. And if we move forwards, we'll start to see one of our major issues for a major church is our floor. And the floor is actually rolling and bubbling up all over the place. And it's a very, very big floor. It's a big, big job. So, and if we just move forwards, you'll see this is really shows the state of the floor in some areas. And this happened a couple of weeks ago when our entire heating system failed right in the middle of winter. And we had to bring up some of the floor to find out what was going on. And what we saw was original pipe work that is definitely on its last legs. And I think this failure in the heating was very much a shot across the bow to let us all know that this is not going to last much longer. So the floor of the building is significant. Here you'll see some more damage to some of the wall paintings, but I have got a good bit of news to share with you about that, which I will do so in a moment. So moving forwards. So I just wanted to point, this is a little bit of a fun story. When we showed that introductory sort of video of flying over the suburb, the eagle-eyed of you will have noticed that the weather vane was missing from the top of the spire at that point. And actually what happened about 5 or 6 years ago is during a storm, this weather vane that you'll see here on the right actually was blown off the top of the spire, bounced off part of the concrete area and landed in the middle, well, to the edge of the car park, luckily not hurting anybody and not damaging the church. And inside that weather vane, we found this wonderful time capsule with a note from Lutyens. It says, "I want you both," wrote Mr. Lutyens in one of his provocative, witty poetic letters, which always delighted my husband, that's Henrietta Barnett, "to write something to be placed on the top of the spire of St. Jude's Church. The canon is to write a message to the future, and you are to say, even I, by my indomitable will, have built what you see all around you." So that's quite a fun bit of thing. But if you want to know more about this time capsule and some other things, you can always visit Hampstead Garden Suburb Virtual Museum, and we've left the link in the information, which holds a lot of information about our treasures and the fun information about St. Jude's. So do go and visit that. And that was a really great moment with the community coming together to support St. Jude's, because our fabric lead, David White, who's done an amazing job keeping the show on the road for such a long time, managed to kind of rally the troops and raise a significant sum of money to be able to replace the weather vane with a replicant. So that was a good bit of news for us. This is my house here. This is the vicarage, which I'm extremely lucky to live in. It's the only vicarage that Lutyens ever built, as far as we all know. The Manx is something slightly different. And I'm here in the study with lovely Lutyens fireplace behind me. It's also part of our sort of portfolio of property, and has some significant problems with cracking and all sorts of problems as well. And certainly I can't afford to heat it very well. But it's an extraordinary building. And if you ever find yourself in Hampstead Garden Suburb, please do come and knock on that pink door and I will give you a cup of tea. So if we just move forwards. Great. So this is our partner church, the Free Church. And one of the things that's been on my mind a lot since I got here into the parish is not only the care of our building, but also our partner church, the Free Church, which is also a wonderful building, very different to St. Jude's, but has a lot of the same problems structurally. And so I think it would be really remiss of us, and I don't want to talk for other organisations, but I think it would be remiss of us to not think about their future and their building at the same time as we're considering the future of St. Jude's. And this is Henrietta Barnett, which is was built originally to be the Institute, an adult education place, but now it's the leading #1 non-fee paying school in the country. And so we're really lucky as a community that we get to host some of the brightest young women in this country, certainly young women who are going to go on to be the leaders of this country, and they're there on our doorstep. And certainly when we're considering the major Lutyens buildings that are all in Central Square, I believe that they should be part of that conversation as well. And then moving on to the fly in the ointment. So this is the 4th building in Central Square, which most people don't really know exists because it's hidden behind the tennis courts. It was built, we believe, in the 1960s. And this is essentially our church hall. I think it's fair to say that it's not a good partner piece to the other buildings. We're very pleased to have it because it acts now as a vibrant community centre with all kinds of things going on. But one of the things that I certainly identified from the beginning of my tenureship here is that this is ripe for redevelopment. And I think that we could find a way of building a much more exciting, more fitting building in that place. And this is Central Square from above, and you'll see those 3 major buildings, those gorgeous buildings, all gazing tenderly at each other across Central Square, hoping for a future, hoping for a renewed relationship. And you'll see that church hall building just behind the tennis courts there. Robin will point it out for you. And that's that site where I believe architects of the world might get very excited about what we could do with that place and that space instead. So I believe that actually when we're thinking about this project and we're thinking about St Jude's, it's really important to look at the four buildings as one and think about how we might be able to build a future for everybody in this remarkable place. And of course, this picture is a very good example of what the future is. Here are our children at St Jude's enjoying their Christmas service this year. And I think it's always important to remember we're not just a building, we are a body of people. And this was a very beautiful event that we had last year as well, where we had over 300 Christians, Jews, Muslims, and Hindus together in the building, singing for each other and singing together, which I think is a really important statement about us as a building. And this is the kind of slogan, I suppose, that came to me when I thought about St Jude's and how important it was to get the building open and for people to recognise it as a home for many reasons. So our slogan is, whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever you believe, you are welcome here. And as a community, we take that very seriously. Here you'll see St Jude's in full flow in worship with our wonderful choir. This was part of, I think, one of our Christmas services. And it is recognised as having one of the finest acoustics in the country. So many major recordings have taken place here. And the way we really keep the roof on financially at the moment is by being a venue for recordings. And that sort of keeps us going at the moment. And this is a picture from New Year's Eve, where we welcomed over 600 people to come and dance. It was a proper rave in the nave. So we had and then we have a fantastic fireworks display put on by the Residents Association every year in Central Square. And here you can see everybody enjoying a really fabulous evening and event. It's important to us as a church that we're open to everybody. This is a good bit of news that we've had. This was a meeting that actually took place yesterday, where we have started to begin the restoration of our wall paintings with members of the Koltveit, from people from the Cathedral and Church Buildings Trust and people from the Commonwealth Forum. And we all came together yesterday as passionate devotees of the project to restore the wall paintings and to start to begin a plan. And we finalised that we will now be in relationship with these organisations, with the Koltveit, using the Lady Chapel as their London training ground for postgrad students from probably from the beginning of next year. But this is a really big moment for us because they are obviously the leading institute probably in the world for this kind of work. So this was a cause for great celebration. But of course, in order to restore those wall paintings, we need a watertight building. We need to think about how we tackle the floor, how we tackle the pointing, and all of those other things that are going wrong at the moment. So I thought this was a great picture to kind of end on, where we're looking up to heaven, we're looking for inspiration, we're looking for allies, and we're looking for partnerships. So if anyone's got any wonderful ideas about how you might be able to help us, please do get in contact with me. My contact details will be in the links. And if you feel inclined to and inspired to, you're very welcome to make a donation.
Thank you. That was an incredible presentation to all of you. And I'm just going to read a couple of Q&A questions. One from Anne Gray. In the elevation Tom showed, it appears that Lutyens broke the roof slope into two very slightly different rates of slope. It is not perceptible in the photos. Was that common or a Lutyens thing? What was his intent?
You know, I'd have to look at it again to see that. I think there is one place where he actually changes the hip of the roof, and it looks like the slope is changing. I think that roof is the same slope, but it could be wrong. But it would not be unusual for Lutyens to do very subtle shifts in geometry to achieve certain proportions and geometric relationships. He was really a genius at geometry. And if you look at his construction of not just roof forms, but also details and columns, He was amazing. In fact, his motto was, "By measure we live." So mathematics and geometric things were very important to him. So I'd love to look back again, but it wouldn't be surprising if he did something like that.
Fantastic. Okay, there's the second and final question, and we've just got a couple of minutes left, from Andrew Botterill. Hopefully we'll get an idea during the webinar of the total amount of money needed to keep St. Jude's in good shape for the next 100 years. Is there a prospect of the Church of England making a meaningful contribution, and to what extent can the Lutyens Trust UK or USA assist in fundraising?
I think the last sort of sensible estimate of how much kind of money we might be looking at just for St. Jude's is probably about £5 million. Just to kind of tackle the floor situation, I think the last estimate was over £1 million. So it's significant money that we are looking for. However, I think that kind of money is fitting for the importance of the building. You know, it really is one of the great ecclesiastical buildings of this country. Really important building. So I'm hopeful. I think that we can find it somewhere. Unfortunately, Church of England rarely gives out large pots of money. As I said earlier, Anglican churches are all self-funding, so they do kind of give out sort of small pots of money or small loans or and things like that, and they'll certainly help as much as they can with, you know, putting people together and connecting you with people, but essentially they do not put out large grants. And of course we've tried the Heritage Lottery grant twice in the past, which is normally the main funding body for this kind of thing, and we've been turned down twice. It doesn't mean that we would be turned down a third time if we tried again, and I am hopeful that we can get ourselves into a better place to try for that. But in itself, it's expensive to apply for those grants. We paid about £75,000 of our own money to actually apply to the Heritage Lottery twice. And they have been through a period where they've done less funding towards churches. So I'm hoping that that's turning around now. So there is lots of opportunities, and I don't in any way think that St. Jude's is a lost cause. I think we're absolutely on a roll, but we do need allies. This is not a project that you can do on your own, you know, and it's not a project that generally a typical Anglican church congregation can do on their own. We need experts, and we need people who are passionate, you know. That's part of the reason I'm here, I suppose, you know.
Tom and Ankie, could either one of you speak on just the importance of this for from a Lutyens point of view, and then I think we'll have to close out.
There are two significant things. Yes, it is his largest built church, as was mentioned earlier before, and it's also the first time we really see Lutyens working as a town planner or urban planner in conjunction with the architecture, which of course led to the great work that he did in New Delhi. So there's a very, very significant complex as well as the church itself. Tom, I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think those are the two very good points, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
So yeah, so we're pretty much out of time, but I guess a quick question from Vivienne Hobbs about the green material on the altar. The is that malachite or something? The green stone on the
yes, I believe it is, but I can check that to make sure what it finally ended up being.
I don't know. It's not malachite. It looks
not,
like a jade probably or something like that, but I'm almost certain it's not malachite, which has a whole different sort of structure and pattern. But it is. It looks to me like some sort of jade, if I could venture that guess.
And
Yeah.
there's a kind of long question about why are Anglican churches self-funding? I don't think we can get into that, unfortunately, but if you have questions.
I mean, we are the only sort of church group in Europe that is self-funding. Everybody else, you know, if you go to any other European country, they are funded through the taxpayer. And that is part of the reason that so many parish churches are closing in the UK, you know, and because the financial obligation of keeping these amazing buildings going is just becoming too much for people. So it's definitely something that we hope the church will review and the government will think about again.
And one last comment from Debbie Mays from the Lutyens Trust in the UK. The Lutyens Trust has a meeting with Church of England reps and Reverend Emily at St. Jude's tomorrow to consider the need for repairs. So we're working on all fronts to help and collaborate with this revival of the beautiful church and surroundings.
Thank you, and it's given us just such great hope to have you guys on board helping and supporting us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up now. If you need other links, I'd suggest just reaching out to the Reverend Emily or St. Jude's and finding the links that you need. I'll also be posting this webinar in the next few days, and you can find it on our channel, Lutyens Trust America on YouTube, and you can pause and see the links that were in there too. So thank you to everybody, and hope everybody is well. Take care.